What is up, mortals? It is welcome to Season 2 Part 5 of What If Deku Had Venom. Shigaraki was frustrated to say the least. All anyone ever seemed to talk about was Stain. But what about him? What about the Namu who were released into the streets that night? The public acted like all that ever happened that night was that Stain was finally captured by Endeavor and nothing else, even with these new recruits. The only reason they seemed to join the League of Villains was due to their belief that Stain was somehow associated with him. He honestly despised Stain. But if it was one thing he got out of Hasu that night, it was this new symbiote, Carnage. Does that sound good? Shigaraki asked. Shigaraki was sitting in the bar by what appeared to be himself. But the picture widened to reveal a red Inkai being with white eyes and sharp teeth sitting next to Shigaraki. Yeah, sounds good. But about those new recruits? What about them? What shall we do about them? Any plans? Those brats from UA. They went off to the mountains to train. There have been a couple interesting ones though. Could it be the ones known as Midoriya Izuku and Bakugo Katsuki? Shigaraki laughed at the assumption. Two minds do think alike. Also yes, those are exactly the ones of interest. Midoriya for that symbiote he has. We weren't done experimenting with that one yet, and all of the creations we had were half-baked. Our strongest one was that one we call Scream, and even then, they're extremely unstable. Over time, their hosts begin to develop schizophrenia and an overabundance of bloodlust. A very bad combination to say the least. Neat. And what about the Bakugo kid? Simple really. The way he acted at the sports festival, it was unbecoming of a hero, but more so of a villain in their early stages. Nice, by the way. One of the new recruits, Toga was her name, seems interesting as well. Extremely interesting. Her obsession with blood is entertaining to say the least. I want part of me to be with her. She's 17, and you're an alien. I doubt she'll be interested in you in any venereal W. Not like that. You know exactly what I meant. Symbiotic bonding. Oh, and what about our bond? Just cutting off a hand or something would be good enough for bonding with Toga while our bond is relatively unchanged. After all, I can regenerate any and all lost limbs. Much more than that if I deem it necessary, honestly. Heh. Shigaraki nodded in understanding before ordering Kurogiri to get the squadron ready. While Shigaraki was busy though, Class 1A and 1B were in the middle of training. Day in and day out the two classes were being trained rigorously to improve the strength of their quirks, as you all could tell from Bakugo's performance from the ball throw. There wasn't that much of a difference from the beginning of the year in terms of his score. You all may have developed your skills in terms of quirk usage, but that simply isn't good enough. Without the strength to back up those skills, then those skills will be absolutely useless in a fight. After that initial night, every single day for the two classes was agonizing to the core. At any moment, it seemed like some of the students were about to drop dead. Some like-minded even bled throughout the process, but were forced to keep going in order to push their quirks to the absolute max. In Izuku's case, Aizawa had pulled him aside to discuss his quirk. That quirk of yours, it has quite a lot of abilities, but the one that interests me the most is that electrical shock ability of yours. Your fights were being recorded and I was able to see some of the tapes. That electrical shock you released in your fight against All Might was able to completely paralyze the hero. Yeah, that kind of happened by accident. Why, you see, when we were trying to charge all our energy into one of our arms for extra strength behind the attack, but we didn't expect for that electrical attack to be released instead. I mean I have a sentient quirk, so sometimes I say we instead of I. It's become more frequent recently. Aizawa nodded in understanding. If you say so. But I want you to especially focus on that ability. It seems to be really powerful. Focus on what you can do with that ability and how you can possibly lessen the output to where it won't be as powerful towards weaker opponents. Izuku nodded in agreement before he went off to train. Izuku breathed in and out before charging his body with the energy from before. It took a couple seconds, around 10 minutes 20, before Izuku was able to charge up with the power. Let's go, partner. Before we get back into the video, let's hear a word from our sponsor. Izuku's body was covered by Venom throughout the process, but once they finished charging up power, they felt a wave of energy consume them. For the rest of the day, Izuku and Venom trained in managing the output of their upgraded strength. Throughout the time, something that the two discovered was that when they held it inside for a good amount of time, there were some adverse effects. The first time they used this power, they fought Stain with it, who also had a symbiote bonded to him. Right after, Izuku's body became completely paralyzed. Izuku started to feel this about an hour into it. He struggled to move his right arm during this process. When he tried to release the energy outwards through his arms, there were huge shocks of energy similar to electricity. Destruction was left in their wake as Izuku struggled to control the output of the energy. It took a good 5 minutes before the energy shocks started to lessen in ferocity. But during this time it felt like Izuku's arm was beginning to erode away. Izuku wanted to stop multiple times throughout the process. It felt like his muscles were tearing away and Venom even struggled to hold on. Aizawa was watching Izuku's progress intently as well, so Izuku couldn't even stop. This is actually starting to sting. You know, we can't stop now. We aren't allowed to stop. Once the day was over, everyone was exhausted. Some of the students dropped dead. They immediately fell asleep, but were forced awake by Aizawa. Izuku could barely move after the events that happened throughout the day. That ability of theirs was incredibly strong, sure. But it was also hard to manage. At least they learned something today. They could use whatever that ability was called for a good amount of time, which could either multiply their strength and speed or they could release bioelectric shocks from their arms if they really focused the energy a good amount there. It was weird, but it was pretty effective for battle. It was just that the drawbacks were terrible, which really made that power an extreme last resort. Being incapable of movement after using the ability was a big no-no. Not only that, but it also took a toll on them if they used the ability for too long. They would begin to feel strain in their body if they used the power internalized and if they used it for electrical blasts. Then after a couple of minutes it would start to affect Venom's regenerative ability, cutting it down by a good portion temporarily. It even began to hurt Venom as well. That ability was frustrating to say the least. The students practiced cooking curry afterwards. Those who failed their practical exams were removed from the rest of the group by Aizawa in order to take their remedial classes. Izuku was in the process of cooking some curry when he noticed something. The little kid, Koda was his name. A thought came into Izuku's mind. Where exactly was the little boy going? He went to find Mandalay. He figured that he was her kid considering Koda looked the most like her. Well, not much, but they shared a couple of similarities that none of the others had. Hey Mandalay, about Koda. Is he your kid? She denied it and explained that Koda was actually her second cousin. One of her cousins was actually one of Koda's biological parents. The problem though was what caused Koda's mindset about hating heroes in the very first place. His parents were a famous pro-hero group known as the Water Hose Duo. His parents defended a village against an incredibly dangerous villain. He was known as Muscular, and a rank villain. They put in their best efforts in order to protect the people. But they died in the process. They were able to wound the villain, sure. But the price they had to pay completely changed Koda's outlook on life. That's pretty rough. I see. Well, I'll change Koda's outlook on heroes if it's the last thing I do. Izuku, with this new information, went to look for Koda. He wanted to genuinely help the kid. He could even see a little bit of himself in Koda. If Venom never bonded with him and never met All Might, he most likely would have never made it into UA. If he never made it into UA, he could only imagine how devastated he would have been. He would have to face reality, that he would never become a hero all because of one anomaly in his genetics. He curled his fingers into a fist at the thought of it and punched one of the walls at the thought of it. The strength behind it was more than he expected. He left an imprint of his fist in the rock wall. Who's there? Izuku looked around and saw Koda sitting by the mountain cliff. He tried to talk to the boy, but as soon as Koda saw who was there, he immediately turned away from Izuku. Go away. Izuku didn't listen and walked closer to the boy. But when he did, he noticed something. Fire. This can't be a regular forest fire either. Those are blue flames. Someone's intruding the premises. Izuku immediately went high alert at the mention of this. Venom was screaming in his head. But what made things even worse was when his spider sense went off the rails. It was like a fire alarm was in the process of sounding off in his head. He fell down to his knees and clutched his head in pain. Koda looked at Izuku with an eyebrow raised. What was this guy up to? Was this meant to be his sorry attempt at getting his attention? How pathetic. He looked away from Izuku, but he jumped when he saw a tall figure draped in a cloak which concealed their appearance. Hey kid, nice hat. You want to trade? I really don't like my mask. THTH, that voice. It sounds so familiar. A sudden blur of memories rushed through Koda's mind as he tried to remember that voice. That unforgettable voice. The voice of that monster. The monster that killed his parents. Koda immediately went on the defensive and he activated his quirk. Oh, that quirk of yours. It's almost too familiar. You must be that Water Hose Duo's kid. Nice. I can reunite you with your parents. Kid, isn't that something that heroes do? Huh. The large figure grabbed their cloak and yanked it off of their body to reveal the person underneath. It was none other than the villain from the village incident way back when. He had blonde hair, wore a dark red tank top, black pants, and shared some resemblance to Katsuki. Izuku's spider sense was pounding in his head. It was like his senses were screaming at him to get out of this terrible situation he was in now. But he looked down at Koda. He couldn't leave the boy behind. He pushed himself up and rushed over to grab Koda. But he wasn't fast enough. Muscular had already grabbed Kota by the throat and held him up in the air with a sadistic smile on his face. Let him go. Izuku charged at Muscular and elbowed the man in the gut with Venom already having covered his body. Muscular gasped in shock from the pain and let go of Kota. But he looked down at Izuku. You must be that Midoriya brat. The boss wanted to see you. He already told us how to subdue you as well if any of us ever encountered you during this raid. He pulled out a lighter and threw it at Izuku. Izuku backhanded the lighter away from his body. But Muscular continued to smile as Izuku saw some oil on the ground next to the lighter. He put two and two together, realizing what it was. No. Gasoline and fire. The worst thing that could happen at this moment. Izuku realized that his best chance at surviving here would be to jump off the cliff and stick the landing. But what about Kota? He grabbed the boy and threw him to the other side. Get out of here. Get help if you can. Izuku saw Kota's teary eyes. He was scared, but he ran. He looked back at Muscular and the spreading fire that was obscuring his vision. His heart was racing the closer the fire got to him, but then he looked back at the cliff and jumped, praying that he could land somewhere in the forest with no fire. But something grabbed his leg right as he fell. He looked up to see it was Muscular. I don't think so, kid. You're coming with us. Muscular threw Izuku up into the air and grabbed him by the leg, yanking him back down to the stone floor before flinging him into the fire. Izuku screamed out in immense pain as the fire forced Venom to retreat back into Izuku's body while he had to take the burns. Now that little symbiote of yours is out of the way, we can focus on you alone. Muscular grabbed Izuku by the hair and continuously smashed the boy's face into the ground until he bled profusely. Completely unconscious, he slung Izuku on his back and disappeared into the night. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer for this video, as well as the editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out mortals. Have an amazing day.